I thought it was really good. Some good days, some days were a little sloppier, and that's part of it, especially a new system.
I need to see him back to his 2022 version of himself. They bring Liam Cohen in. Now Trevor Lawrence is on his third head coach, and I don't even think it's about, Trevor Lawrence showing us anything. It's about showing Liam Cohen.
I find it fascinating to see what these minds can do. There's Grant, 28 years old, offensive coordinator in the NFL.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. We're talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars in tonight's video. This team is truly underrated. They truly are. Liam Cohen, I think, is an absolute wizard when it comes to offensive success. I think Trevor Lawrence gets a terrible rap. Maybe it's the hair. I honestly think it is probably the hair. But the Jaguars, it's always just been a team that I've always found so interesting. I've always loved their jerseys. There's just something about the Jacksonville Jaguars. And now that I live in South Florida, I'm a Packers fan, by the way, but there's just something about this Jaguars team right now that has me excited because I do like Trevor Lawrence. I actually used to hate Trevor Lawrence, but it had nothing to do with him. It was because I'm a Notre Dame football fan, and we turned the clock back a few years ago, and it was like against Clemson, obviously he wasn't my biggest, or I wasn't his biggest supporter at that time. But Trevor Lawrence, now that he's in the National Football League, really cool dude. And we look at BTJ, we look at Travis Hunter, we look at this running back room, and it gets me excited because Liam Cohen, like I said, I live here in Tampa Bay, South Florida. Liam Cohen did wonders for Baker Mayfield. I mean, he did wonders. I know Baker was already kind of resurging his career because Dave Canales, now the head coach for Carolina, did a really good job getting them back on track. But what I'm hearing from head coach Liam Cohen right now, I really like it, and he's expecting big things from Trevor Lawrence and me as well. We saw, or I'll actually even describe this to you. I just read an article on The Athletic, and here it is. During the team's early report date for training camp, the quarterback room took a 100-question quiz covering all aspects of the offense, from concepts, formations, and motions to run game assignments, protections, and audibles. Lawrence stood out, leading the group with 85 correct answers. And I know it sounds pretty trivial here, but keep in mind, the guys like Nick Mullins behind him, the veterans in the room, they have so many years of experience with Liam Cohen's scheme. And Trevor Lawrence is a smart dude. He's one smart cookie, at least in my opinion. And he just got a big contract like a year ago, and they had a crazy comeback win in 2022 in the playoffs. But in 2023, it was just derailed from injuries. He had a high ankle sprain, he had a shoulder sprain, and he had a concussion. In 2024, honestly, the whole Jag season was a wash, truly was a wash. But in 2024, Trevor Lawrence re-injured his left AC joint, so he had to get his second shoulder surgery since his rookie season. 25 years old, gets another concussion, and the season is cut short. But like I said, it was a wash. Offensively, defensively, doesn't matter. Wasn't a great season for Jacksonville, and that's why we see Travis Hunter currently in training camp in a Jaguar uniform. So one thing that is interesting that you don't need to explain to a Jaguar fan is this. Last season, we really saw the implementation of a better wide receiver and even tight end room. Brenton Strange, tight end, I don't think people know about him, just to be honest with you. We'll talk about him in just a minute or two, but the progress took a little bit of time to surround Trevor Lawrence with weapons. And the Jags, everything I read about the Jacksonville Jaguars is they got to get the offensive line set. They're not going to have success because of the offensive line. And we look at their two moves on the interior offensive line, and McCarry and Hainsey. But here's the thing. Last season, they gave up the fourth lowest pressure rate in the league at 27.4%. And BTJ, BTJ was a superstar stud. He finished fifth in the NFL with 479 deep receiving yards. And like we keep saying, well, now Liam Cohen's in town, and now Travis Hunter's in town. So it's kind of crazy to say, but one of the biggest strengths, possibly the biggest strength for this entire Jaguar team is now their offensive weaponry. And yes, of course, Dyami Brown, I do love what I've been seeing from him. Parker Washington as well, I guess, is having a nice little training camp. The big issue outside of offensive injuries and, Doug getting fired, they had a lot of flaws on defense, all right? Pretty much nothing clicked for the Jags defense last season. They allowed the second highest EPA per play. They ranked third worst in yards per play allowed at 5.5. They also finished in the bottom 10 in run defense, pass rush, and coverage. Now, you get it. The group is kind of similar. It's not like they had a crazy amount of additions. You could look specifically at the secondary. Eric Murray from Houston, Jordan Lewis from Dallas. I am excited about that. But, Walker's a stud. Allen's a stud. I've always been big on Devin Lloyd. I've always also been big on Oluokun. I feel like if I actually had to tell you who's the most underrated or underappreciated linebacker in the National Football League, I would probably say Foyesade Oluokun. That would actually probably be my answer. But my biggest thing for Jacksonville this upcoming season is going to come offensively, because we need Trevor Lawrence to get back on track. We need Trevor Lawrence to get back on track. It's as simple as that. And BTJ is already ascending himself as one of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. And you go back to last year, I feel like the Jags are pretty undercovered in general. We've been talking about the Jaguars for a few years, ever since we started talking NFL 3 or 4 years ago. So the team's undercovered in general. But Brian Thomas Jr., if you're a fantasy football fan, or if you're a Jags fan, obviously, or if you're even a hardcore NFL fan, you know what I'm talking about. This was a rookie who had 87 catches for 1,282 yards and 10 touchdowns. So he's kind of already broke out into stardom in his rookie season. But you bring in the inconsistent quarterback play/room, and I just kind of feel like it's about to get to the next level. Maybe not statistically, because it's hard to replicate 87 catches for 1,300 yards and 10 touchdowns. But when we look at this wide receiver room with Brian Thomas Jr., Dyami Brown, and now Travis Hunter, you have to almost pick your poison when you're lining up against the Jaguars wide receiver, because the thought process here is Travis Hunter is a legitimate full-time wide receiver threat. That's also going to help out not only Dyami Brown, but also BTJ. And so we look at this loaded running back. You got Tootin, you got Bigsby, you got ETN there. Even the tight end room is underrated, because Brenton Strange, I believe he was second in receiving yards for the Jaguars last season, which is crazy. And like I said, most people don't really even know who Brenton Strange is, because his rookie year he was playing, he wasn't a starter. Wasn't catching too many footballs. And last year we really saw it, but because of not only being the Jacksonville Jaguars and being undercovered and underrated in general, nobody really knows, honestly, who Brenton Strange is. And the same kind of philosophy applies to BTJ, even though obviously fantasy purposes people know he's on his way up. So my point here is Jacksonville's underrated. They are very underrated. I know the defense isn't perfect, but this should be a underrated team, at least as far as it stands on July 28th. So, folks, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed it. Hit that like button, hit that sub button, and we will actually give me a record prediction, a loose one, for the Jaguars in 2025. That's it for me. Peace.